when I'm with you, I wish for more. Yeah, and I don't even know you. Hope you let me. Got so much to show you. If you let me, girl, you flowing through me. So electric. Yeah, I'm wishing that right now won't ever stop. You got me falling in love, my darling, but I ain't see you before. Will you be there for me when I'm calling you? Is it you? You got me falling in love, my darling, but I ain't see you before. Will you be there for me when I'm calling you? Is it you? I'm calling you. Hey, I'm calling you. I'm calling you. I'm calling you, darling. Damn, never saw you coming. Now you all I see. Yeah, 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 yeah. Damn, asking myself, could you be the one for me? Yeah, yeah. And I don't even know you. Hope you let me. I got so much to show you. If you let me. 'Cause girl, you're running through me. So electric. Yeah, I'm wishing that right now won't ever stop. You got me falling in love, my darling, but I ain't see you before. Will you be there for me when I'm calling you? Is it you? You got me falling in love, my darling,
The world was a lot smaller when Fnatic ruled back in 2011. Over the last decade, very few times have we been surprised by a world champion. Not since the days of TPA in Season 2. Korea has dominated everyone for a very long time. The LCK has proven time and time again that they were the benchmark for developing world champions. It oftentimes felt like the rest of us were just playing for second and only for second. That was until 2018. China ruled the world with success at MSI and Worlds. And they asked a question, the question that would be answered in 2019. Will LCK be the unquestionable best league in the world? We turn to the 2019 World Championship, and we truly do not know who will be crowned the world champion. 24 teams from around the world have already made the shortlist. And for one of those 24, the road to being crowned champion starts today. And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the World's Group Draw Show. In 30 minutes, we will be starting the draws for 2 stages of Worlds, the play-in stage and then the group stage. I'm Quickshot, joined by Ender, Vedius, and Froskurin. And before we get to the draw, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the teams, some of the players, and I want to dive straight into it with the most controversial topic I could possibly start with.
Yay.
Who will win the World Championship in 2019? There's a lot of people talking.
You want us to decide already?
Yes. Didn't you just stand over there like, everyone can win, it starts today?
That is how I started, and that was for dramatic effect. Now I want to know, like, what are some of the fans, what is social media, what are some of the teams talking about? I know we have some shortlisted contenders already, so Frosk, answer the unenviable question of who could be a team to win Worlds.
The question you asked for is who are the favorites in the tournament, and it has to start with the LPL, but it's not going to be the team that everyone expects me to say. It's not going to be Invictus Gaming. It's instead going to be the #1 seed, Fun plus Phoenix, because Super Carry Doinby finally made it to Worlds. He is their superstar mid laner known for his very creative picks. He plays things like the Pantheon, the Nautilus. He doesn't go more the traditional Akali or the Kianas, but he completely changes the game, and he attacks the map, a very heavy roam style mid laner.
And this team is incredibly well-rounded. I was so impressed by what I saw in the finals against RNG. This team had good macro, this team has great players, they have a lot of versatility in their playstyles and drafts, and I feel like that they are a terrifying team coming into the World Champ.
Other names that you want to grab hold of this is the jungler Tian. Him and Doinby are, again, very strong in that 2v2 and roaming down towards that bot lane. Christ is a very strong support that no one really has heard of, and LWX and Gimgoon are solid pop-off players.
All right, let's see if the LPL can make it 2 in a row. Let's move on to another potential contender. Ender, who else could win Worlds?
Well, I think SKT has to be on everyone's minds here.
Shocker.
Not just because of the history behind this organization, but also the way they've been playing this year alone. I think you look at this team, and it's not just about scaling into the late game. Instead, they have Clid coming out of the jungle, who is popping off for them in these early games to set them up for the stage of the game where they thrive. This is the best team fighting team inside of the LCK, and it's something that teams on the international stage must look out for.
And everyone has their eyes on, of course, the return of Faker to the World Championship. Right now, there is a lot of debate around who the best mid in the LCK is right now. But one thing you can say for sure is that Faker is in form. Faker's team looks great, and they are poised to challenge for the Summoners Cup once again.
I want to dive into this best mid out of LCK, but that will come in a few minutes' time, a little later in the show. Why is G2 also on the shortlist, Vidius, as a potential favorite to win
Worlds?
Worlds?
It's cute to have all these other favorites, Quickshot. Obviously, we have to talk about the actual best team in the world when it comes to G2. And people will be like, can you really say that? I can, because they are reigning MSI champions. They're going into Worlds as current international champions, and all eyes eyes are on them. Now, if you base it off their most recent performance, things probably don't look that great. We saw sloppy play, we saw some mechanical mishaps, but everyone knows, especially the European fans, the peak that this team can perform at. They seem to have the aggression of LPL teams combined with the calm and coolness of LCK teams, and they are a threat that you have to respect coming into Worlds.
Look, this is the most stacked roster that Europe has ever sent to Worlds. Top to bottom, they won the All-Pro team in every single position here in Europe, and they talk a big game online. They back it up with their incredible play on the Rift.
I think it's the conversation of, in the same way that we're rating SKT so highly as favorites for the tournament, it was really their playoffs that clinched it for them, whereas their regular split was very shaky, especially early on. G2 are almost kind of the inverse of that. They managed to lift the title. The playoffs were very shaky, but their regular split was so damn dominant. So it's about the longevity of both these teams, which is why they're both on this list.
It's really, really exciting. And one of the goals that we have for this pre-show before the groups draw is to inform and entertain, to a degree, a lot of the viewers at home about some of the teams, some of the players we're going to be talking about, so that when we actually draw the teams, some of that context and shock and awe can happen. Let's talk about some of the teams that could cause problems for the favorites, right? Let's talk about some of the teams that will show up on the international stage that could knock out a favorite or a dark horse to win the whole thing.
I'm going to jump in early, quick shot. I have become a huge Damwon fanboy.
We know that is.
I love this team. They are big. I mean, the reason is because I call them a G2 Light. This team is fast, they are aggressive, they get in your face, and they are full of young, hot-blooded talent that is some of the best in Korea.
What happens when they actually beat G2 then?
I mean, I'm gonna cry, but I'm also gonna be excited because this team, to me, just looks fantastic. They're fast, they're efficient, and they are what I define as opportunistic. And if you make a small misstep, they will not be afraid to pounce on it. And I think this is so unconventional from what we have so commonly seen for so long from the LCK region.
And in particular, the player that I love to watch on this team is their jungler, Canyon. He is one of the most fluid early game pathing junglers in the LCK. He changes his path up onto him. You cannot predict this guy, and he shows up exactly where he needs to be. It's really solid performance out of him, combined with their support Barrel that is absolutely on form. Those two players will just run you and gun you down.
The question, of course, is can this team take their domestic success and translate it into an international stage? Because we have seen instances where new blood from the LCK in particular has a lot of hype around it, a lot of buildup, they birth onto the international stage, and they fall a little bit flat. And maybe that's because the expectations are set so high because you have the legacy of LCK behind you, or maybe it's because they're not quite ready.
It is, because one of the things I actually don't think is very heavily discussed a lot is just how many times the new teams from LCK, new players from the LCK actually fail to deliver on stage. And of course, there's two sides to the coin. It could be because the expectations are so high. Hey, look, they still did well, just not versus the expectations, you know? Like, Vedius, how well will these new kids do knowing they're also going to be in the play-in stage for the first time ever? The LCK third seed's going through play-ins.
Well, I think that the play-ins will do a lot of benefit for a team like Damwon as well. Give them time to play against teams that we typically don't expect to challenge the likes of, especially the caliber of players that are on this roster. It'll get them used to playing on a different stage, playing in a different environment, but for how long the World Championship is, the different kind of stress that you have to undergo. It is a brand new experience, and we've seen many new rosters come to this stage and struggle over the extended pressure. So do I think Damwon are one of the teams to take the Summoners Cup home? No, but I do think that given the potential on this roster, they can really cause some damage and create a lot of chaos that people don't expect.
Okay, let's give you another suggestion. I know we have one other team, and I'm looking at this, and you guys are saying Cloud9 are going to be one of these other teams.
Yeah, I mean, Cloud9, if you look at it historically, out of North America, it's always Cloud9 that shows up on the international stage, even though they don't always come in as the region's first seed. I think a lot of this comes down to very strong fundamentals for these players. Across the board, you look player for player, I think they're weaker than Team Liquid generally in this matchup, and that's why they lose domestically. But when they come international, they always show up. Last year, we saw them make it to the semifinals in Worlds. This year, I think, led by Svenskeren, we're going to see very fast play out of this team that isn't really typical out of most North American teams.
Yeah, and that's really who I want to put the spotlight on. Svenskeren has been a phenomenal jungler. You know, getting to look closer at his pathing, I can see a lot of the praise that's levied for him, and I really do believe that he's like, if you just put Svenskeren on TL, I think that's when you get the true TL North American super team. Like, sorry, Smithy, but it's very different styles, and I just love how Svenskeren attacks the map in different ways.
what sort of pressure is now on Svenskeren and Cloud9? Because
there's so much pressure. I feel like that when you look at this roster, just naturally having the name Cloud9, you default are expected to go to Worlds if you're a North American fan, and then on top of that, you're expected to perform. This team consistently makes it out of the group stages. In groups that they should not get out of, they always end up doing it, and it is always surprising in how they do it. And again, it's what my two colleagues were saying, that they have good fundamentals, and there's always a player that stands out. And I think that right now, the player that's standing out is Svenskeren, and I think that he will challenge the best junglers in the world.
Depending on your age, either the Exodia comp or the Voltron comp, depending on whatever show you prefer. Look, we don't have enough time to dive into every single. I mean, exactly every single. It's not Power Rangers either, but we don't have enough time to dive into every single team and every single player. Of course, we do have a 20-minute countdown till the draw show. So I want to move us on and talk about some of the players. And one of the ways that I'd like to do this is let's take a look at which region is sending the most stacked individual lane. Okay, so we're going to go top through support. I want to know which region has the best representatives. And let's start in the top lane. And Frosk, I want you to tell me why China is sending us the best top laners in the world.
Get the pictures on screen because you have to look at these three names. Remember the name. The Shy, I think G2 in particular have that one implanted on them when they
never forget that.
Gimgoon from FPX. This guy was formerly on Zenix Storm. He went over to the LPL, kind of washed between a bunch of teams, has always been a standout, but never really got his opportunity. A Korean import alongside Doinby. Now it's him and Doinby that are really leading the charge for very powerful solo laners. And then Long X. This guy was formerly known as Xiao Al. And if you're an LPL hardcore fan, you saw this coming from a mile away. Everyone knew that Xiao Al was going to be a massive standout in that top lane. Now with his new name swap and taking over for RNG's Let Me, RNG no longer have the same weakness that undid them in 2018, which was failing solo laners. Xiao, who is popping off, and Long X is a big deal.
Now, what about North America in terms of competition in the top lane? I think of Impact. I think of Huni coming back to play on European soil. Licorice as well, who showed up.
It's interesting because that's not what I would have thought. A lot of people would be like, what about LCK's top laners? What about? But like, you're right. When you think about the quality of top laners that are coming from North America, they've proven themselves internationally. Every single one of them.
See, that's the thing. Think of every North American team that's played on an international stage in the last 2 years. There's been more discussion about the respective top laners and how they've done good or not than many other roles. So it's just the one that comes to mind the most.
Yeah, I think actually if you look at the whole of North America and which lane is strongest coming out of that region, I do think it is the top lane. The history of both Impact winning a world championship as well as Huni with his time on Fnatic, going to the finals on SKT as well, now returning back to North America, as well as Licorice, who was the sort of unknown quantity going into last year's world championship. He showed up and looked very, very strong. So as far as roles go, I do think top lane is where NA is strong.
But I still think that LPL kind of takes the cake.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
While I do acknowledge that you're right,
there's a pretty big gap.
There's a debate to be had between those two regions. I do think that when it comes to top lane talent right now, LPL does have the edge for me.
Now, one of the things that's quite fun is as we go through the rest of these lanes, there was a lot of discussion and debate, especially amongst the three of you, around how to determine some of them. But junglers, this was a pretty clear winner.
Super easy.
Where we go.
Without a shadow of a doubt, it is LCK for jungler. Canyon, Tarzan, and Clid have spent this year redefining expectations for the LCK. This is a region that's always known for playing slower, playing a more controlled style of jungle, but all three players on your screen right now pop off in the early game. Canyon's fluid early game pathing, Tarzan's ability to have huge impacts in the game, and Clid's ability to get his team ahead in every single game that they play cannot be undersold.
And what's nuts is just how stacked the jungle position is at this tournament. You look at the LEC representatives, the fact that we're sending our top three junglers in Xerxes, Broxa, and Jankos. We just gave all of that praise to Svenskeren. Smithy has also proven himself on an international stage. So it's like the fact that Canyon, Tarzan, and Clid stand so much head and shoulders above a very stacked field is why Korea seems so very terrifying at this tournament.
There's so much fear in your voice. So much fear in your voice. All right, so jungle, clean and clear. I really wanted EU to win the midsection. I just don't think that we can.
There's two rookies. It's Nemesis and Timid. It was never going to happen.
EU mids is an old narrative, Trevor.
What if the two rookies do show up and pop off, then maybe retroactively we will remember this discussion. We're not there yet. So, Ender, who's winning mid and why?
Well, I mean, mean, I think we got to look towards the LCK one more time. You start off that conversation because Faker is showing up, and he looked so good towards the end of this LCK split, but also two newer players to the international audience in Showmaker and Chovy. The conversation in LCK was actually which of these players is actually the best in mid lane. It was not a clear-cut Faker among lots of analysts because both these two young players have shown up so much.
I mean, even today, I was having a heavy debate with Jizuke around who the best mid laner in the LCK was. I'm like, it's Chovy, and he's like, it's Faker. And that just goes to show how stacked the mid lane pool is, because there is so much debate, and it's not even like Faker is playing poorly. Faker is in form, and you have two other mid laners that are coming alongside him that are, if not in more form than he is. So it's terrifying to think the caliber that is coming out from LCK in terms of their mid-jungle duos. And it's going to be fascinating to see whether or not they are capable of showing up on international stage, because again, we talk about rookies. There are young and new players from the LCK for the first time on this international and world stage. And given that we have evidence to show that they don't always show up in playoffs, the world stage should in theory be a bigger audience. So will they actually show up in this situation?
And I think that's just like the cherry on top. Because when you're looking at this, you really have to take in the whole collective, because there'll usually be like at least one or two standouts of every position, but then it's kind of like the third one that lets you down, and so you just grab what's stronger. It's the fact that in this LCK lineup, you have the cherry on top of the standout, that high ceiling of the greatest player of all time, and then you have the well-roundedness of also Chovy and Showmaker.
Oh, I love it. You guys have to jump on Twitter, tweet at LOL Esports, and tell us whether or not Faker is still the best mid laner in Korea. We are still talking about each of the lanes. We are talking about the teams or the regions that are sending multiple teams to the group stage. And now I'm going to move us on to the bot lane and where we find a winner, and we don't have a clear-cut winner this time.
People are going to get angry. It is crazy.
Okay. When we sat down in the room to do this, this one was definitely the most contentious. And I think that there are fair arguments for either side of this one for probably three
but which
reasons.
sides, Frost?
Okay, let's start with the LEC bot laners. So you have the representatives of Perks, Reckless, and Kabe. And I think the big defining argument for why the LEC would be sending the three best collective bot laners is in the fact that it's bot lane. It's not ADC, it's not marksman, it's the fact that you're going to have Garen Yuumi flying down there, you're going to have your traditional ADCs, and you're going to have your Syndras. The fact of how they've revolutionized the meta down there, I think is what's really defining, as well as having international pop-off performances. When Reckless meets Uzi, he gets dumpstered, but when Reckless met Jackie Love, he put him in the dumpster.
So you still haven't given me where your answer is. You've given me multiple considerations, Vivenius.
So for me, I was edging a little bit more towards Europe initially, but then I watched the FPX final, and now I'm a little bit more towards the LPL representatives. But I do think that it is a debate on your preference, because I think that everyone can agree Perks Reckless coming out from Europe and Jackie Love plus Uzi from LPL are probably two of the standouts. But LWX and Kabe can be up for debate. And it's very much around LWX is this aggressive, in-your-face, very...
strong laner.
Yeah, strong laner. Whereas Kabe is a lot more about playing for his team and much more in the team fight aspect. Yeah. So which one do you value more and which one do you rate higher?
And if you ask anyone about Kabe before 2019, they would tell you, oh, he's consistent. He's a good AD carry. But in 2019, he has been trying to prove himself. It started in spring when he was voted on the first all-pro team here in Europe. Everyone said he was the best bot laner in the LEC, and now he has led Splice to another final. Since 2016, it's been a long time, but it has been championed through him and his incredible team fighting.
And it was the fact that Kabe really planted his feet and said, you know, not today. He was a clutch performing member for Splice in multiple high-pressure situations, and even though Reckless and Perks did get the better of him in most matchups, he was still incredibly impressive. So it's about, what do you weight? Do you weight the team fighting and the consistency and the scaling of Kabe?
I'm going to weight it on what shows up in the world meta.
I will say this, though. When you take an LWX and Chris, I do think that FPX have a significantly stronger 2v2 bot lane than Splice.
But that's not what we're talking about. We're just going individual laners. But Frost, you have set me up for the supports, though. So let's go. Ender, where did we land on supports?
For supports, again, it was a close battle between EU and the LPL, but in the end, we're going to give it to EU. Primarily because of Mickey and Hylissang. These are two of the best supports in the world. They're absolutely insane at finding advantages. advantages. You can't find two more aggressive supports out there. These guys roam all the time through that mid lane to try and get advantages for their team. And while, yes, you look at some mistakes by these guys when they go too ham, their highs are unquestionably the best in the world.
And we can see the odd one out here. We recognize that Norskeren is not necessarily like the other two in that Mickey and Hylissang are defining in terms of their team's playstyles, and G2 and Fnatic would be different teams if they lost those supports. But we do think that because of the collective strength of those two and how strong they are as a support, that maybe it's biased, but I believe that it really does outweigh the shortcomings of Norskeren.
See, the thing is for us, a lot of conversation was again over the LPL bot laners. Your three representatives are going to be the likes of Ming, Crisp, and Baolan. Baolan did not have the strongest regular split. Ming and Crisp are incredibly good. You don't know the name Crisp, you will remember the name Crisp. He is a very strong support. But do you lose the identity of FPX and RNG if you remove Ming and Crisp versus losing the identity of Hilly and Mickey and what they provide for G2 and Fnatic? And that was the biggest difference for us.
I cannot wait to see how each of these lanes and individual players perform on the World's Group stage. I do want to turn our attention to the play-ins teams and start talking about some of the regions, as they will be the first ones to participate in the group draw show. Now, in typical LEC, European-style fashion, we do want to play a little bit of a game. Before we talk a bit seriously about the teams and players, I have actually printed out some names and some faces of individual players, and I'm going to be asking my analysts to help me pronounce these individuals. Okay?
Oh no.
Now, they do ramp up in difficulty, and I think I might need my single for this one, but here's the first option, okay? Team Royal Youth coming out of Turkey. Frosk?
Okay, so here's the thing. You can pronounce this one two different ways, because you can
There's
either
three.
say... Okay.
I'll give you the third one.
I'll start with the first two. You can either say closer, as in he closes the door, or you can say closer. Now, his name is Closer, as in he's moving closer to you. I don't know what the third one is.
I thought the third one could have been C Loser. Moving on. Let's see the next one. All right, Isurus Gaming. All right, Isurus Gaming. Let's try this one.
Wait a second, that's not a player, that's a product. That's Bug Axe. It's a spray deodorant. It's about yay big. Here you can sort of spray it like that, get it all over your body, because this thing, it doubles as an insect repellent. So not only do you smell good, but you also get rid of all those bugs. You know what they say about bugs? No bugs. That's good.
Right, moving on.
I think it's Boogax.
I
don't know. What is it?
I'm pretty sure it's
also,
like boo.
we are just having a little bit of fun with this. We do actually have pronunciation
But it's
guidelines.
also,
We don't need them right
it
now.
stems from a long history of mispronouncing player names.
What about
No. It's short.
Bird?
Is it not Bert?
That's
Legendary.
It's short.
Oh,
It's short
sorry,
for
no,
Albert.
There's a second T, so it's Bertie. My apologies.
Bertie.
Birdie, short for Alberti.
Legendary superstar ADC of Flamin' Joe's.
Shout out to Bertie. All right, this one is for Frosk and only for Frosk.
Okay, it's ananasic, and it means pineapple.
There's no
Are
N
you sure?
in
No,
this.
no.
Because
I know. Okay, hold up. Hold up.
How do you guys at home say this?
No.
No, I know what they're saying.
Phonetically.
Trevor, I know what they're saying. They're saying in chat right now, they're saying a yaya chick.
Yeah, you chick.
So the capital, he has capital H's.
They're all capitals here, but yeah, they're not correct. Sorry.
Because it looks like the N.
And why is ananasik important in Germany? It's the German word for pineapple. It's close to it. Ananas, anyway.
It means pineapple.
Okay,
His name's pineapple.
This one is actually a little bit more for the viewers at home because we should know, but I want to see if you guys can give me some creative
Just ask
responses.
Frost this one.
Okay.
'Cause,
So this one is we should know.
Okay, I came from like
Give it a go,
hard
Frost.
years of LPL, like trying to pronounce stuff that sounds that my mouth cannot make. I'm not trained, and then I see Vizicachi. I'm like, oh,
like, the first time she saw it, it was Vizikasasi.
It's Kasaksi.
All right, now this one, on three, I want us to say together, all right?
Okay.
Because there's the reveal.
Oh.
1, 2, 3.
1907 Fenerbahce Esports.
Oh.
You don't But anyways.
You're fired.
Okay, now the fun and games are over. Let's move on a little bit and start talk about some key play-in icons, all right? There are a number of players that are returning to the world stage, a number of players that are very, very successful, and I do you want to get a little bit more serious tone? So let's start with Saya and Frostgrown. I know you have some strong feelings.
So, you know, coming to this segment, when we look at the play-in teams, a lot of people will just kind of be like, okay, I'm ready for group stage, like next. But you have so many iconic and legendary names who are consistently showing up, and it means so much for these regions to see these guys strive for it. And when you think about kind of like repeated international appearances and just domestic titles, Saya has to be the first on your list. He is technically the most decorated domestic player of all time in League of Legends. He has only lost like a single tournament a single domestic tournament that he has participated in. And he's not known for being like hyper flashy in lane or like hard flexing on kids, but he is known for being a great in-game leader and a superior shot caller. He works with his longtime jungler, Audi, and Esports Gaming with Saya kind of at the core of it are this LATAM super team. And it's Saya who will really lead them to success and hopefully make it to the main stage at Worlds.
We'll have to see. Esports Gaming will be in Pool 2 of the play-in stage group stage in just a moment or two. Let's turn our attention to Bert. BRTT, of course, from the CBLOL.
Yeah, I mean, you can never forget BRTT. This guy's just a mainstay when it comes to international competition. And you go all the way back. You remember he was on the 2015 Pain Gaming roster that was one of the first emerging regions to ever win 2 games in the group stage at Worlds. This guy is a legendary bot laner. In Brazil, one of the biggest, probably the biggest name you can throw around in that region. And he's an absolute legend when it comes to the Draven in the bottom lane. You look at his arms, he's got Draven on his arms. You can't forget the man's Draven. He is still in 2019 pulling Draven bans, which is incredible.
For me, it's just the flair of BRTT. It was like the fact that he had the skill and then he backed it up with such a big personality, and like he's almost like the epitome of it, the essence of a Draven player. Like he will just style on you, and Flamengo, I think it is. I think so, yeah.
Yes.
We're denied an upset in appearance previously at MSI at the very end, and now they finally get to showcase themselves, and this is what CBLOL fans have been waiting for. They wanted this team on the international stage to represent them.
But that is both a blessing and a curse, because CBLOL fans are intense when it comes to their fandom, both for and against the representatives. Flamengo will be a Pool 3 seed, and we'll see what team they play in just a moment or two. I cannot get through a play-in show without asking Vedius about a Japanese player. So let's talk about one of the icons in your eyes.
It's Saros. We have to talk about him. It is the Heimerdinger and the Ziggs main. I've been hearing a lot about Zillion as well. I'm yet to really see it on the international stage, but this guy has been one of the key figures when it comes to Japanese League of Legends. And last year, it was such a big moment for the LJL when they were able to make it out of the play-ins group stages and go into the knockouts. And it was so unfortunate that they drew EDG, but there was so much support and excitement around this team of what they were capable of. And you can see the slow and steady growth that this team and these players are making. And Saros has been the consistent mainstay of this roster. And I personally am always excited to see the Ziggs Heimer main back on the international stage.
I am going to make you, I want to hear your bold calls for how this team's going to do once we see their group, okay?
World champs.
You are always... The next one I'm actually going to jump on as well, because Unicorns of Love moved over to Russia, or they started a team. Edward is back at Worlds. Unicorns of Love are playing at Worlds for the first time ever. And this is a guy that goes back all the way to Moscow 5 Gambit days and is extremely experienced. I want to see what he's going to do back in Europe and in the play-in stage.
Yeah, formerly Gosu Pepper. He's got a long legacy behind him.
Gosu Pepper, wow.
I know, right? That's a throwback. He coached in the LEC for a split for Rogue, I believe.
Yeah,
and
in
then,
spring.
Yeah, hopped over to the LCL, excuse me, and it was like, want to go to Worlds, boys? Tag along.
Unbelievable. All right, one last player, Enda, if you can tell me about Lloyd.
Yeah, I think so. Lloyd comes from the LST. This guy goes way back too. 2015, he was playing at Worlds for the Bangkok Titans, and he's just been through it all for this team. You look back to just last year, he also qualified for Worlds. The interesting thing about Lloyd, though, is that every year it seems like he flips between positions. He's playing jungle early on, now he's playing ADC. You remember last year at Worlds, he was a jungler. This year at MSI, he's back again. He's an ADC. Now at Worlds, he's a jungler again. So he literally just flips his role for his team so that they can go to these international events and hope to impress even more.
How scary is it, Vedius, just before we get to the draw, that Damwon Gaming and LCK Rep is in the play-in stage for the first time ever.
I mean, it's pretty scary for these teams. But it's also a great opportunity to showcase what you're capable of because, again, remember, Damwon is a lot of young players playing for the first time on an international stage, and regardless, they are still representing the LCK. So if these play-ins teams are able to showcase a good performance against the likes of Damwon, it will give them a massive confidence boost and give them an opportunity to really make a name for themselves on the international.
And absolutely will. Thank you guys so much. We're 10 seconds away from the draw. Just as a reminder, the play-in stage will be drawn, as will the group stage. Immediately after, I'll be back with the analysts to discuss the results of the 2019 World Championship group draw. Welcome to the LEC studio in Berlin for the 2019 World's Group Draw Show. I'm Quickshot, joined by Jizuke and Yamato Cannon, two representatives from Vitality, team that really had a massive impact on the 2018 World Championship. The SKT, G2, FPX, and Team Liquid, the best teams in the planet, are competing at Worlds 2019, but it is a long and tough road to the Summoners Cup. Let's find out who will be facing whom in the different stages of the tournament. We will first do the play-ins draw, followed by the group draw. The 2019 League of Legends World Championship is making its return to Europe, and we're here to take a closer look at the tournament's format. 24 teams will compete in up to 3 stages of Worlds, starting with the play-in stage, followed by the group stage, and concluding with the knockout stage. The play-in stage will take place in Berlin, Germany, and consist of 12 teams. The #1 seeds from Brazil, Japan, Southeast Asia, Oceania, the Commonwealth of Independent States, Latin America, and Turkey. The #2 seed from Vietnam, and the #3 seeds from North America, Europe, the LMS, and for the first time ever, Korea. These teams will be drawn from 3 pools into 4 groups. They will then play a best-of-1 double round robin within those groups, and the top 2 teams from each group will be drawn into best-of-5 knockout matches. The 4 winners will advance to the group stage, where 12 new teams will be waiting. Those teams are the #1 and 2 seeds from Korea, Europe, North America, and the LMS. All 3 representatives from China, as well as the #1 seed from Vietnam. The 16 teams will be split into 4 groups, where they'll play a best-of-1 double round robin. The top 2 finishers from each group will move on to the knockout stage in Madrid, Spain, which will play host to the first 2 rounds of a best-of-5 single elimination bracket. Finally, the last 2 teams will meet in the finals in Paris, France, where one will raise the Summoners Cup and secure their place as the 2019 League of Legends World Champion. It's time to find out which teams will be competing against which other teams in the 2019 play-ins stage. You can see groups pool 1, 2, and 3 behind me. We'll slot the teams into groups A, B, C, and D. Jizuke, could you please draw the first team from pool 1? And the first representative is Clutch Gaming.
The LCS, Clutch Gaming ran through historic pillars TSM and CLG to star in this play-ins rodeo. And Huni is coming home, European fans, and he's bringing Tanner time. Homegrown talent, Demonte is bringing trust back to NA mid laners with just as much to prove at this event. This team is a hungry one for skirmishes and for Rift Herald.
Clutch will slot atop Group A. Jizuke, if you could draw the next Pool 1 team. The next representative from Europe, it is Splice.
Slow and steady, Splice finally returned to the international stage after 3 years, helmed by star marksman Kobe. The odd one out from the other European representatives, Splice are bringing a bunch of fresh faces to the international stage, including rising star Humanoid, EU Midsman. Also a huge congrats to Vizichachi, who has finally qualified after his debut in 2014.
Obviously, Splice slot into Group B, and Jizuke, please draw the third team. And it is, of course, Hong Kong Attitude that will sit atop Group C.
After a disappointing collapse of the LMS in 2018, the 3 LMS representatives are hungry to regain respect in international discussion. The key player is Mission, who has since returned to the squad that traded him away to help lead them back to the international stage after the 2017 appearance. He's teamed up with the familiar face Crash, and while once competitors are now the first line of attack in proving the LMS is here to play.
And of course, Jizuke, if you could please draw the final Pool 1 seed. And Damwon Gaming from the LCK for the first time, Pool 1 in the top of Group D.
New team, new names, and new expectations as the 3rd seed for the LCK qualify for their international debut. This team has redefined the LCK macro, bringing a fast and furious playstyle built on powerhouses Canyon and Barrel. While expectations are high, question is if this green team can stand tall under the spotlight of the world stage and lead Korea to former glory.
Now, the Pool 1 seeds are drawn. Yamato Cannon, if you could draw the first Pool 2 seed, they'll slot into Group A. And it is, of course, the Unicorns of Love.
Former EU fan favorites, the Unicorns of Love were reborn in the LCL to much success, finishing 2nd in the regular season before taking playoffs by storm. A close final with Spring Split champions Vega Squadron pitted former teammates against each other, but in the end, UOL triumphed. Fans of the LCL on the international stage may recognize domestic powerhouses like Boss or Nomans, and most of the important, the Thresh Prince himself, Edward.
Yamato Cannon, if you could draw the next Pool 2 seed. And it is Isurus Gaming.
The super team of LatAm, Isurus Gaming, are built around legendary mid laner and the most decorated domestic player, Seiya. With his partner in crime of 4 years, Audi, this team revolves around mid-jungle pressure to beat you on the map. This iteration of the roster might be Seiya's best chance to finally make it to the group stage, and the one that LatAm have been waiting for.
And of course, they will slot into Group B. Yamato Cannon, if you could draw the next team, please. And it is Low-Key Esports.
The VCS opened to an intense race between 4 teams: GAM, Team Flash, Dashing Buffaloes, and Low-Key Esports. It would come down to the wire before GAM and Levi reigned supreme before being challenged by the bad boys of the VCS, Low-Key Esports. After getting destroyed in the playoffs, Low-Key, now humbled, fought through Team Flash to represent Vietnam as a 2nd seed. Keeping with their VCS roots, they are an aggressive team that attack you through the jungle with DNK. Alongside GAM, Low-Key are here to prove that VCS is a contending region.
And of course, they will slot into Group C as you rejoin us here at the station. The 4th and final ball did unfortunately open. And of course, as it is the final name in the pool, Yamato, if you could please do the pleasantries. And it is Royal Youth.
Taking Taking down fan favorites Supermassive, Royal Youth are a collection of nobodies that defied expectation to become somebodies. Centered around LCK veteran Pilot, Royal Youth excel in hard-engaged teamfight compositions and went the distance due to pop-off performances from their jungler Closer.
And we are down to the Pool 3 seeds. Yamato has stepped across. Could you please draw the first Pool 3 seed? And of course, it is Mammoth.
Newcomers to the international stage, Mammoth only formed in Split 2 of 2018 before revitalizing their entire roster at the start of 2019. After a disappointing 5th place finish in Split 1, Mammoth were dominant in Split 2 playoffs, not losing a single game on their way to the title. Their mix of Triple, King, and Destiny's international experience with first-time competitors Fudge and Bopip could be exactly what the OPL needs.
And Mammoth joined Group A alongside Unicorns of Love and Clutch. Yamato, the next team, please. Detonation, focus me.
Representing the LJL for the 6th time internationally, Detonation Focus Me are a familiar face to many. Having formed in 2013, they quickly became the driving force in Japanese League and are 8-time LJL champions. Although a Japanese team has never made it to the main stage of an international competition, they narrowly missed out on the knockout stages at MSI as their 4-2 scoreline in groups was narrowly too short. With an unchanged team from MSI built around veterans like Yudafon and Evi, a lot of people will be thinking this is the best chance that the LJL has ever had.
And of course, they will slot into Group B. Only 2 play-ins teams remain. Please draw one of them, Yamato. And it is Mega.
The Thai representatives from the LST built their roster this year around 3 of the region's 2018 Worlds representatives, Rocky, Lloyd, and G4. After disappointing at MSI earlier this year, Lloyd role swapped back to jungle, as he often does, and they upgraded their bot lane, bringing in Korean AD carry Duel.
And Yamato, if I could ask you to draw the final Pool 3 team. And it is Flamengo Esports.
After joining CBLOL in 2018, they made the finals. In their first 2 splits, only to be upset in both of those series 3-2. This summer, they managed to win their first Game 5 in a final to qualify for their international debut. This team is led by Brazilian icon BRTT and will lean on him to carry them the distance. BRTT and Flamengo are looking to remind the world of the CBLOL of old.
And with that final draw, the 4 groups for the play-in stage have now been locked in. We will reset the stage and prepare for the 2019 World Championship Group Stage draw.
Okay, so right out the gate, looking at these groups, the one that I actually find the most interesting is Isurus Gaming being matched across from Splice. Now, the reason why I say that is stylistically, Splice are a team that don't necessarily attack teams in lane phase, although we'll see if kind of the skill discrepancy between major regions and emerging regions changes that for Splice. But Isurus Gaming are excellent at playing the map, and I felt that they were a team that could do really well unless they ran into a very aggressive early game competitor. Splice, I think, is a good stylistic matchup that we might actually get to see Isurus Gaming shine even against a major region.
I also think if we look over at Group D, Royal Youth coming in as a Pool 2 team has to be very happy that they drew Damwon, meaning they can't get them in the knockout form of the play-in stage. So if they're able to come out of this group, or Flamengo underneath them, they have the ability to try and make it into the group stage.
And then the other thing that I'm super hype about,
Thank you very much. We will get more time to break it down after the draw, but we're moving on to the group stage. As you can see, there are 2 pools, 4 Pool 1 seeds and 8 Pool 2 seeds. Yamato Cannon and Jizuke will once again draw the teams that will slot into the groups. And just a reminder, that in one group, you cannot have more than one team from the same region. I will explain that in more depth if the teams happen. Now, Yamato Ken, if you could please draw the first Pool 1 seed. G2 Esports.
MSI champions G2 continue to come out on top in the LEC. Their star-studded super team remains one of the biggest European powerhouses in League of Legends history, as Caps, Perks, and all of G2 ready themselves to take on the best in the world, a taste of international success only propelling them to greater heights. Now for the first time in the modern era, EU and G2 are at the forefront of tournament favorites.
May I ask you, Martin, to draw the next Pool 1 seed? It is Fun plus Phoenix.
After 4 years, super carry Doinby finally makes his debut on the world stage. Securing his first domestic title, Doinby is recognized for his creative picks, innovative laning, and map impact. Alongside powerhouses Tian and Gimgoon, FPX were just short of breaking the record for the most winningest LPL team of all time. They speed ran through the LPL and now, as one of the favorites of the tournament, look to bring the Summoners Cup back to the defending region.
Only 2 Pool 1 teams remain. Yamato, please draw one. And it is SK Telecom.
A team that needs no introduction, the 3-time world champions and 2-time MSI champions are back on the world stage after a disappointing 2018, which saw them missing out on a world spot. After finishing 4th in the LCK Summer Split, a lot of people wondered if SKT would miss out on Worlds for the first time ever in 2 consecutive years. But they had other plans. The legendary SKT playoff buff took full effect as they swept aside Afrika, Sandbox, Danwon, and Griffin.
And of course, SKT slots into Group C. Yamato, if you could draw the final team. And it is, of course, Team Liquid.
From MSI finalists to Summer Split champions back to back to back to back, Team Liquid continue to rule North America and the LCS. Packed with veteran talent and world champions, this Liquid roster carries high hopes for North American fans. Jensen and Doublelift in particular have now proven themselves on the international stage and look for nothing less than contending for the top.
Let the fun begin as I ask Jizuke to draw the first Pool 2 seed. The first team to be drawn is Griffin.
Griffin are a team that was meant to be at Worlds last year. After dominating the Korean Challenger Series in 2018 spring, they shot to the top of the LCK in summer, only losing to KT 3-2 in the finals. They then narrowly lost to Gen.G in the qualifiers, meaning the world would have to wait another year before they could take to the international stage. In 2019, Griffin have topped the LCK regular season in both splits, and both times have been stymied by SKT in the finals, leading to many asking if they'll choke on the world's biggest stage.
Griffin joins G2 Esports in Group A. Jizuke, please draw the next team. It is J-Team.
Always second to big names AHQ and especially the Flash Wolves, J-Team were finally able to convert regular split success to playoff victory, securing their title and finally birthing Fofo to world stage. A staple of the region, Fofo often stood in the shadow of Maple, but now gets to show the world he's been the true power of the LMS, and through his roaming map playstyle, wants to bring respect back to the region.
J-Team slot into Group B. Jizuke, the next team, please. It is Fnatic.
In what was dubbed the greatest LEC final since 2015, Fnatic showed us that there is more than one world-class team in Europe this year. Ever since their victory at Worlds Season 1, Fnatic have been trying to get back on top of the world, and last year they were agonizingly close before being destroyed by Invictus Gaming in the finals. Since 2018, they lost their star mid laner Caps to their rivals G2, but have built and come into 2019 looking stronger than ever.
And of course, Fnatic will slot into Group C along with SK Telecom. Jizuke, the next team, please. It is Cloud9.
Often seen as a meme team, Cloud9 continue to show up on the international stage. They have made every World since 2013, and after making North America's furthest ever run in 2018 by beating Afrika in the quarterfinals, Cloud9 will want to prove they can go one better this year. With Sneaky now holding the record for most Worlds appearances at 7 in a row, all eyes will be on him alongside LCS Summer Split MVP Sven Skaren to continue Cloud9's international legacy.
As Group D already contains a representative from the LCS, Cloud9 will move to the next eligible group, meaning Group A, along with Griffin and G2. Jizuke, the next team, please. And it is AHQ Esports Club.
Last seen on the world stage in 2017, it's been a while since AHQ was a household name in League of Legends. After hitting 4 Worlds in a row, it almost seemed like we'd seen the last of AHQ Esports Club. However, they've shown that they are still a force to be reckoned with in the LMS. With Ziv, their top laner, the only returning player from their teams of old, many eyes will look at him to carry the team, but Weka is the player to watch. The mid laner turned ADC will be looking to follow in Perk's footsteps and claim international glory for the LMS.
And of course, they will slot into Group D along with Team Liquid. Only 3 teams remain. Jizuke, please draw one of them. It is Royal Never Give Up.
Legendary RNG returned to the world stage after collapsing in semifinals just last year in their year. All the familiar faces are joining them with just the newest addition of Long X to the top lane. But no discussion about RNG is complete without mentioning their superstar ADC Uzi. And guess what? This is still the Uzi show.
And once again, as an LPL representative already sits in Group B, RNG will join Group C and conclude that with SK Telecom and Fnatic. 2 teams left. Jizuke, please draw one. It is defending world champion Invictus Gaming.
Defending world champion indeed. Invictus Gaming limped back to the international stage after a rough split riddled with roster swaps and underperformances. But when push came to shove, it was the youngest member, Jackie Love, that stood tall, pulling Rookie and the Shy across the line to the regional qualifier. While IG struggled in recent performances, if they return to their 2018 form, they are an easy dark horse for the tournament to lift the cup back to back.
The first available group that fits Invictus Gaming is Group D. They join AHQ and Team Liquid. Only 1 team remains. Jizuke, please do the honors. And it is GAM Esports.
GAM Esports, formerly known as the Gigabyte Marines, exploded onto the world stage in 2017 after taking TSM to 5 games at the MSI qualifiers. In the same year, they took games off of Fnatic and Immortals at Worlds, playing fast-paced, kill-heavy League of Legends. Since then, they have struggled to keep up the pace, but the return of Zeros and Levi to the lineup, they dominated the VCS Summer Playoffs, not losing a single game. This year, representing the VCS are a direct seed into the main stage. GAM Esports are likely to cause some upsets once again.
And of course, GAM take the final spot in Group B, joining J-Team and Fun plus Phoenix. That does conclude the group draw for now. I would like to thank you, Matakanen and Jizuke. Stay with us as we will be discussing the groups and asking the question, which one is truly the group of death?
Well, I think we can answer that real quick shot. Group C looks absolutely killer. SKT,
Someone check on Fnatic.
RNG, it doesn't get any more brutal than
I
that.
thought Yamato and Jizuka are supposed to be helping Europe out. What is this?
Now, I will say that Group D, Team Liquid having Invictus Gaming, who are looking pretty weak and who they dismantled at MSI.
That's true.
And also AHQ, I think NA is feeling pretty good for TL. I think they're popping out of that group no problem.
I'm still trying to, like, Europe, they're not super happy.
No, hear me out though. G2, they dodged GAM Esports, so they're looking good.
True. They also dodged an LPL team, which is arguably one of the teams that would give them the most potential problems. So stylistically, I think EU fans can be pretty excited about G2. NA fans can definitely be excited about TL. Fnatic fans, maybe a little more worried.
I just think that Group A is also, frankly, I think the most interesting, because depending on what Griffin's performance looks like, A, you're going to see G2 versus Griffin.
Yeah.
Everyone wants that.
All right, welcome back. We did need to just synchronize with everybody, and I'm catching up on some of the news. Frosco, I'm sorry to interrupt you halfway through.
I never get to talk.
You just had 14 minutes of opportunity, so I find that disingenuous.
Oh, my
I
God.
do apologize. I actually missed all of the conversation as we moved up. So Group C, clearly the group of death.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, without a
How
doubt.
close is Group A to Group of Death to Group C?
What I was saying about Group A is that depending on how Griffin show up on the international stage, obviously, I think it's fair to say that the favorites are G2 and Griffin in that group. And that's unfortunate because we just talked about how Cloud9 are usually the team that shows up for NA at the world stage. And they might not even get a chance this time because of how stacked the group draw is. That said, Cloud9 have been in very rough groups before, considered groups of death, and managed to really mess people up in them.
So there's obviously a lot to unpackage, right?
Oh, yeah.
We've got both play-ins groups. We've also got group stage groups.
We'll move to planes in a moment. Let's stick with the main groups for now.
Okay. So I would like to start with effectively the spiciest group, which is Group C. I think that it is the one that is the closest and up for most debate. And something I was saying before the World Championship was I would love to see Fnatic in SKT's group, because I think stylistically it is a very interesting matchup, because Fnatic in the past were known as this very team fight reliant style. And if we think back to last year, when they made it to the finals of Worlds, it was very much Broxah plays around Caps, that's their early game, and then they always go to the late game insurance of team fighting with Reckless and Caps at the forefront, and then Bwipo was just like the supplementary reliable top laner, right? Now they've evolved their play style to being a lot more like G2, and they're very free-flowing, they're very much about playing towards side lanes, they take advantage of globals, and they attack.
What you haven't told me is, will Fnatic beat SKT?
Yeah, I'm getting to that. And my point is, yeah, I'm getting to that. My point is that their style is very different. So in the past, I would have said Fnatic is just a worse version of SKT, but now I think they are very different. And I think that there is real possibility for upsets to happen here because of how different they play.
So you mean SKT could be Fnatic? That would be the upset? I'm trying to answer fast.
Don't put words in our mouth, Trevor.
That's fair. That's very, very fair.
None of these three teams are going to be having fun, Trevor.
Now, Frosk, what does RNG do to this equation?
This is why I'm like, someone check on Fnatic. Is Reckless okay?
Because all I want to talk about in this group is the AD carries. We have Uzi, Teddy, and Reckless. I don't care who the fourth one that goes in there. You can't find a harder group when it comes to like bot lanes in this tournament.
Yeah.
It doesn't get better.
Also hilarious is that every play-ins team, like whoever pops out of play-ins into group stage, they want to avoid this group at every cost. Everyone's looking at the TL group like, can we do it? How we go to IG right now?
Yeah.
And then they look at FPX group like, can we do that one?
Yeah, those guys are definitely eyeballing the B and D groups, right? Like, because I think both those groups have a clear favorite, but the second seed is the one that's little
Group C, because because I still want to talk a lot more about this, just because again I want to reinforce how good SKT look and how stylistically they are very similar to RNG in their approach. There's typically a lot of team fighting, and I think that the impact of the mid laners is very important to the success of how they transition from their early game to the late game. And when was the last time we saw SKT RNG?
2017
Because we did see it, right? Because it was that the year that RNG
It was in Shanghai, the best of 5.
Yeah, it was the Misfits SKT, and then it was RNG Fnatic, and then RNG and SKT played in the best of 5. And back then, SKT got the better of them, but it's always a matchup that is like so hotly debated, and it's like, oh, I'm so excited.
This is like
Talk
the
about a matchup that's going to be
historic group.
debated, right? Because now we've gone to the super sexy, super obvious. But let's go Xiaohu, Faker, Nemesis.
Actually,
Right? How is this going to go?
stylistically, what's interesting is that you have a bunch of mid laners that really like to play for the map. Now,
Yeah.
Faker is known for his ability not only to play for lane, but also play for map. Nemesis is a very heavy, roaming mid laner, usually Fnatic put a lot of players there to gain priority, and then they pick him up. His Twisted Fate, of course, and like getting out to those side lanes. So while you do have like really cool names like Faker and Xiaohu, for one, I'm just very excited because Xiaohu's actually on performance again, particularly with things like his Zoe, and then Faker was also on performance in the back half of playoffs. So if we do get a 1v1, that's cool. But I actually think this is mostly about who gets out to their side lane first. Who gets to Teddy, Reckless, and Uzi first?
Yeah, because bot lane's the sexiest role in this
Yes,
group
it
by
is.
far, but I think it comes down to mid laners and jungles. We talk about the roaming of these mid laners, but also think Broxah, Clid, really strong early game junglers. Fnatic love to snowball their games. Karsa, a very smart jungler that's like one of the best inside of the LPL. So again, this is another very strong group when it comes to jungles, and when we talk about influencing these side lanes, it's going to start in the mid lane. It's going to start getting that lead and then transitioning that into other areas on the map, and the team with the best mid jungle 2v2, I think, is the one that comes out on top.
Oh, I can't wait to see this. We do have to talk about a lot of teams and a lot of groups, so I want to move us on from the very crystal clear group of death, and let's turn to the second most interesting one in my eyes. G2, Griffin, and Cloud9. What are our expectations? All three of these teams popped up in our pre-show in the build-up, and we were talking quite highly of Cloud9. There are some question marks around Griffin on the international stage, and we get to see what G2 does in group stage. You know, do they drop games? Do they come in firing on all cylinders?
So the way I look at this group, right, is that they can't have Clutch, Splice, or Damwon if we assume that they're the favorites from the play-ins in their group, which means that HKA is pretty much the only team that can join this group. Now, depending on how HKA perform, you can see how there's actually a world where Cloud9, even though on paper you might not put them as favorites to get out of this group, there's a world that they get out of this. Largely because it depends on what kind of Griffin shows up. Everyone knows that pound for pound, Griffin probably has better players than Cloud9, right? Like, everyone knows the talent that exists on this Griffin roster, and everyone can see that there is potential, but we've been talking about potential for this team for like the last 2 years.
Yes.
And Griffin has been disappointing, especially when it comes to most important matchups. Now, obviously in the regular season, they always dominate. And if you want to equate regular season to group stages, there's an argument that exists there, but the reality is, how does Griffin perform in a completely new environment on an international stage? And the one thing you can be sure of is that Svenskeren is on form, and Cloud9, even though they don't individually have the best players, they took TL to 5 games, and they have the ability to challenge some of the best. So I think that this group is a lot more controversial than first meets the eye.
Just before I throw to Frosk, as a reminder, of course, you can't have two teams from the same region in the same group. So when Vedius was talking about, you know, Damwon, Clutch not being able to make it in here, that's why that works. Frosk, take on the group.
I think if we're looking at kind of positional stylistic matchups, you have very clear dominant bot lanes in Perks and Mickey, and then Viper and Lahans.
Yep.
And then you're looking at Sneaky and Zazel. Do I say it right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every time I look at his name written, I'm like, oh, that's really hard for me to read. How do you pronounce that? And I just have some concerns because I know that Cloud9, Svenskeren doesn't give a ton of resources to Sneaky and Zazel. They're usually left a lot on their own. It's not often that people rotate down to them, whereas G2 and Griffin can really attack and blow you up into a lane phase. And so I think that's kind of where a discussion will really start for Cloud9 and how they're preparing for these teams and just making sure that they can neutralize and get their bot lane into more skirmish or team fight oriented situations.
Yeah, I'm really scared for C9 in this group, assuming Griffin do show up, primarily because we look at the strongest point on Cloud9. That's Svenskeren in the jungle. But in this group, you have the 2 best junglers in the tournament in my eyes. You have Jankos and you have Tarzan. I don't know, like, Svenskeren is really good, don't get me wrong, but when your best player is worse than the other 2 players and only 2 teams get out, I don't think you can make it through.
Wow.
Ooh, very, very interesting.
The thing, I'm just going to address the elephant in the room. G2 has a long history of not being super good in group stages.
Thank you. That is what I set the question up with. And
Because
I'm very glad you've come back to it.
I'm like, ugh. I mean, if we base off most
But there's no
recent
VCS representative, Vedius.
Yeah.
It's free.
I mean, it's true, but let's not forget G2 did lose to Team Liquid in the group stages of MSI. G2 have this tendency to have happy games, and
That's actually true. There's huge variance in both G2 and Griffin, whereas people assume that Cloud9, you're probably not going to get a lot of variance. They'll be very consistent and very stable.
I super agree.
And it could be that consistency and stability that actually allows Cloud9 to pop out of this group, whereas G2 and Griffin might beat each other and then lose to, let's say, HKA rocks into this group.
Yeah, and when we were looking sort of stylistically at how like a Cloud9 or a Team Liquid would stack up against a team like G2, I think we actually sort of agreed that Cloud9 has a better chance with how they play proactively through the early game and have a jungler that can compete. So like, I agree stylistically, it could look good for Cloud9. I'm just really worried that they get shut down in the jungle and then they just run around not actually knowing what to do, because usually they have leads out of that role.
Okay, let's have a look. I need to move us on to the next group. Team Liquid versus Invictus Gaming rematch. I am super hyped about this. Obviously, we throw AHQ into the mix as well. Ender, TLIG, what do you think of this one?
Well, this is probably the best group that Team Liquid could ask for, if we're being honest. You have AHQ, which, you know, is a little bit of an unknown quantity, but I think TL can be very confident in that matchup with the roster they've put together. And you have an Invictus Gaming that was slumping all split long. Like, they only turned it on towards the end here, and even then, we have some questions with their volatility game to game. So Team Liquid come into this as a relatively consistent team coming out of North America with very strong players across the board. They should definitely make it out of this group.
I'm just curious how much pressure will be on Invictus Gaming to really turn it on against TL in particular, because it was not a graceful fall.
But also contrast that performance, because that was a slumping IG and a very well high-performing TL that allowed Team Liquid to win that semi-final. Like, let's not mince words, right? So if you still have a slumping IG, do you give Team Liquid a bit of the edge and psychological edge?
I mean, again, if we base it a lot off most recent performance, I do just give the edge to Team Liquid.
Just flat out.
Period, right? Because the reality is Invictus Gaming have been very variable, and even if you just look at their final best of 5 against Top, you can see the variability throughout that series. Like, the performance of each player varies from game to game, and the only consistency that you get is actually from Jaculov and to a degree their new jungler Layan. And I feel like that while there is a high ceiling for this team, you will never sit there and say that the Shy and Rookie are going to be people that you can just ignore. But throughout this split and throughout playoffs, they have not shown the same level of consistency and performance that they did last year. So I right now would put TL as favorites. The thing that concerns me is that a team like Damwon can join this group.
I want to get to that just one second. Just before we get into that, because I actually have a leading point for Damwon, is in this group, is anybody brave enough to comment a little bit on what you would anticipate from AHQ? The LMS has been a region that has not really shown up in recent years, and expectations, at least when I look at this, is I sort of already want to write them out of the group.
I mean, frankly, it's always the same discussion, but I think one of the big things for the LMS region is not just losing, you know, core members like the Flash Wolves, but losing a lot of the coaches and the support structure. The LPL has basically been eating the LMS for a very long time and draining them of talent, and I think that's what's kind of having long-term effects on them. So it's nice to finally see Fofo and J-Team get a chance to shine, but at the same time, I look across the LMS, they haven't been doing well consistently internationally for a long time. They do have some, you know, historic players like Ziv and Fofo that you still can count on, but it's still a lot of question marks because also internal in these orgs, they're losing so many coaches and managers.
And it's actually terrifying, and we need to see how the LMS will bounce back. EU, it's not the same disparity, but he's been losing talent, but has found a way to funnel new talent. Every EU representative this year is European, which is super fun. But I'm going to go back to the question you just said, Vedius. Damwon could find themselves in Group D, along with Splice. Damwon could also find themselves in Group B. It's the only other team that doesn't have... Right. Now, that's my bridge, so we can talk about both. But how different does Group D come for Team Liquid and Invictus if Damwon is in there versus if Splice is in there, for example?
So for me, Group D then suddenly becomes a lot more volatile. But again, I'm a big Damwon fanboy, so bear that in mind, right? But it very much depends on what they look like in players. And my expectations are that Damwon don't drop a game in Plains, right? That's how strong I think they are, and how we talked about them being surprises and that quality bar. I do think that if the team shows up that we saw in their series against Kingzone and that we saw during the regular season, I believe that they can challenge the likes of both Liquid and Invictus Gaming and can make the top of this group. But again, the biggest debate and question mark is, does Damwon even show up? Because the one thing you can say for sure about Team Liquid and Invictus Gaming is nerves is probably not going to be a thing that affects these players, given the veterancy and legacy that exists on the roster of those two teams.
Looking at this from a European lens and where Splice could potentially pop out here, I'm correct in saying that it's what, Group B and Group D?
That's it.
See, I would actually really love to see Splice take a crack at TL, because again, I think stylistically, you might actually get to see Splice do something. Like, they don't just get, if you put Splice in Group B and they run into FPX, I'm like, oh, that's gonna be rough, man.
Yeah.
Just like that early game might get slammed. But against a team like TL, I'm really curious, would TL push Splice in the early game, or will we just have like big scaling team fights over objectives? Who actually has the cleaner macro there to play the map?
Well, I think, again, you'd probably have to compare junglers in that sense, and we think Xmithy, not super proactive in the early game, not the kind of guy that's going to push a team like Splice around, especially because Xerxes in the game, too, one of our best tracking junglers inside of the LEC, rather. So I do think that there is potential for Splice to push the game later, to get into that comfort zone that we know they love to play in, and maybe give them a shot.
Okay, so now we've talked a little bit about Damwon. I want to just bring our attention to Group B. One of the other things we haven't touched on just yet, Clutch Gaming could be drafted into either Group B or Group C. There's no NA representatives, right? So let's keep that in mind. If Clutch get pulled into SKT, Fnatic, and RNG, that feels real bad. But then I get super hyped about the top lane matchups.
Yeah, Huni gets revenge against SKT and Fnatic.
Thank you, right? Like, then I get super, super hyped. But that is like the smallest sub-story in the bigger
That's like the only good thing about Clutch getting drafted in that group.
I will say, and I feel really strongly that Clutch is the equivalent of what Vitality was last year, and that expectations are very low. I think people can be pretty realistic about what to expect from this team, but if they do just play their game, which is put Huni on a carry, go hard in terms of skirmishing and draft team fighting.
Do you think any carry? Because I've seen them put Huni on many carries, and many times I've gone, ooh, that was a bold move.
I mean, I based on what I saw in his recent performance, yeah, we will ignore the Lucian and the
Cassiopeia.
That's the point I was getting
But my
to.
point is, like, again, I'm trying to set the expectation that no one is looking at Clutch and saying that they should get out of these groups, right? But you can look at Clutch and say that there is potential in their playstyle to create chaos, anarchy, and ruin people's days. And if you do not respect them, Huni is a world-class player.
Yeah.
You don't just get to brush them under the radar and say that they're not going to do anything, because in the same vein of Vitality last year, if you disrespect the team, then they have ways that they can upset you.
If they make it into Group C with RNG, it was Vitality that had that tiebreaker game with RNG. Maybe it's written in the stars. Let's touch on Group B before we move on to the play-in stages. FunPlus, Phoenix, J-Team, as well as GAM Esports. I mean, FunPlus have to be pretty happy with this draft, but we also maybe don't really get to see them tested to their max until that knockout stage, depending on who joins them, because Damwon could be drafted into this group, as could Clutch, as could Splice.
I think it's really fair to say that if teams can slot into Group B, they really want to be in Group B, because there's just so many question marks about GAM, formerly Gigabyte Marines, and J-Team, or the LMS in general, and how they'll actually perform at a high end. I do really want to see FPX versus the VCS, though, just because think of how fast that game will be.
I just want to see Captain Levi showing his worth in those games. You know, the guy that they put the Nocturne on, the funnel Nocturne way back in the day. That team had so many unique strategies. Before any team was willing to try and pull them out, it was always GAM leading the charge and using them to find those upset wins. It was one of like the first emerging region teams to really just take the world by storm.
I can hear Yamato's voice in the back of my head saying, play your style.
Yes.
This team lived and breathed that concept.
And, let's not forget that depending on which, like if Splice go in this group, stylistically, GAM and FPX both have a good shot against them. Like, they're fast, they're high action. This is the style that Splice typically struggle with when they have no control over the mid game. And so there's a world in which GAM could actually make it out of group stages and go into the best of fives. And not only would that be a massive deal for the VCS, but GAM having Levi rejoin the team
and get them to the knockout stage.
It would just be such a fantastic opportunity for them. And so this group could be quite volatile. I mean, it will be volatile.
And of course, all of this is theorizing that the favorites from playing stage win,
Yes.
right? This is
Yes,
assuming no upsets happen, and we will get to that in a moment or two. I have one more question for the panel before we move into the play-in group stage. What if Fun plus Phoenix do not obliterate this group stage? What does this do for expectation setting for a team that is on the shortlist as a frontrunner to win Worlds? Like, just assume that they have difficulties with J-Team and GAM.
I'm going to say that I won't think anything about it. I also think that FPX in each best of 5 will change pretty dramatically because their champion pools are very unique. Now, this is all depending on what the actual meta looks like for Worlds. But if you go back and watch their playoff runs and just their regular split games, certain champions that you're used to seeing global have high priority on them just fall to the wayside because Doinby's champion pool and his style is so impactful on the game that he changes the course of things. So how FPX, like, yes, their play style is similar, mid-jungle focus, rotate into the bot lane. Like, you'll constantly see them blitzing down bot and making tower dives. It is pretty consistent, but how they execute on that and the champions that they pick are very different. And so going into any best of 5, no matter what the other team is, it really just depends. What answers do you have to Doinby's chaotic champion pool? Can you deal with some of these matchups? And if the answer is no, then Doinby's going to have a field day with you. And if the answer is yes, then you find the Achilles heel that has really cost Doinby a lot of his career.
All right, very interested to see how that plays out. Let's turn our attention to play-ins groups. As we've already alluded to, I actually didn't get these written down, so I will have to catch up in a moment. There are 4 groups of 3 teams. The top 2 will advance to a best-of-5 stage, and 4 of those winners will then be slotted into the groups behind us. So once we get the play-ins up on stage, pretty clear that we are pretty heavily biased towards Clutch, Damwon, Hong Kong Attitude, and Splice. So the question I'd like to maybe come to towards the end of this segment, who's the most likely to get upset and maybe not make it?
This is kind of tangential because this also is true for the main stage where you have GAM and J-Team in the same group, and you now have Hong Kong Attitude and Low-Key Esports in the same group. So you have both the LMS and the VCS representatives. And this could be the world where you finally see the shift of power, where the VCS finally rise up, tear down the LMS, who are kind of just hanging on to that major region status, and say, no, 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 we are the more powerful region. We are the region now, instead of talking about the LMS, that you need to be talking about the VCS. And I think there's 2 different opportunities in both play-ins to kind of like whet the appetite, and then in groups to really see that come to fruition. And not saying that there's like a grudge match or anything between these regions, but I do know that when a VCS team runs into an LMS team, just because of the history behind like the GPL, the Southeast Asia region, that things will probably get pretty intense. And I think usually when people want to pick of which major region will fall down, they usually target the LMS just because of lack of experience with the region.
Yeah, and even I agree with that sentiment just from studying Hong Kong Attitude and the way they were playing towards their playoffs run and actually leading up into Worlds. This team actually seemed fairly inconsistent, not really in terms of gameplay, but in terms of draft. You know, sometimes they would build these beautiful team fight compositions where they could very easily play out the game and close, but other times they just would not enable their star jungler Crash. You know, this guy's been around the entire world playing for teams, making it to Worlds multiple times in the past. And the problem is, I've seen a lot of games where he just has no lanes to play through. So I think the Hong Kong Attitude need to do a much better job of setting him up to succeed. Otherwise, I agree, Low-Key definitely has the ability to try and upset them and take first.
And kind of focusing on Low-Key and kind of their players to watch and who they are from the VCS. Now, it was a really tight race in the VCS between the Dashing Buffaloes, formerly PVB, Team Flash, GAM Esports, and then Low-Key Esports. And people were trying to figure out who was actually going to be the best team in the VCS. And it was Low-Key, kind of in the very end that slipped over Flash or Team Flash after GAM just destroyed them in playoffs. Now, they are considered a fairly cocky team. There was a bit of controversy, a bit of trash talk between them and GAM, and I think GAM really humbled them and put them in their place. But they really love to attack in the jungle, and I think that's what I've been really focused on when I watch low-key esports, is their jungler D and K, because not a lot of the emerging regions attack through the jungle. They usually rely on like just a player disparity in like a mid lane or an ADC or something like that. It's kind of slow games. They roll up with their ADC, but D and K like out the gate will just like smash you in the jungle. He will hunt and he will find you.
I am such a fan that all three of these teams are in the same part of the world and have history. I want more of the trash talk. I want more of the hype because it just adds to it. I do want to move us on to talk a little bit about Group D. Damwon are obviously in there, and then you've got Brazil and Turkey that are now realistically expected to fight for second place, right? And obviously, taking the second seed means you will fight a #1 seed from another group. Damwon, what is it like for the teams facing Damwon in this group?
I mean, this is the worst possible situation for you. It does feel like these other two teams, Royal Youth and Flamengo, are now playing for second place in this group. And for me, it comes down to the head-to-head between those two teams, because I think it's really hard to write off Damwon. Sure, they're young players. Maybe they look shaky. But at the end of the day, there's so much talent in that lineup that they should be emerging from this group in first place. And then it comes down to, as I said, the head-to-head between these two teams. And for me specifically, I did a lot of research looking into Flamengo, you know, the BRTT legendary player for them. But this team, I feel like they struggle when it comes to like split-second decision making. They have very good fundamentals, and when the game is slow and they can control the game very well, that's when they look really, really strong. But a team like Royal Youth that maybe come in, give them a little bit of fire, make them think on the fly, that's when they make these errors that you don't usually expect to see from a team that, when everything's going right, it looks so calm.
Players to watch on Royal Youth are their AD carry Pilot, formerly of the Jin Green Wing, so that name should recognize or resonate with people. I know, he's like, I get another chance at them. What I found interesting about this Turkish team is that no one really expected them to win. They weren't the heavy favorites. Again, Supermassive are in that region. They have names like Wolf, Zeitnot, like, you know, much more standout big names, but it was really pop-off performance from Closer, and then just the consistency of Pilot that gave Royal Youth a lot of purchase in the region to represent here. I do think that there are some weaknesses in their mid lane, and it's really problematic when you look at Damwon, who has such a strong mid laner. Because I think if you really want to beat Royal Youth, you blitz them 2v2 mid jungle, because Seal seems to not be quite synced with his team. There's problems with lane assignments. He gets lost on the map a lot, and especially on an open map. I think that's actually where you can really abuse Royal Youth, by targeting him specifically. In lane, he's actually very solid. His mechanics are strong.
All right, let's see how their performance goes. We don't have too much time left, but I am going to ask Vedia, Splice versus Detonation Focus. Let's go in there. It is one of my favorite memes of every draw show, but quite seriously, Esports Gaming also inside the group. What's your take on Splice's chances? You have to feel obviously they are favored, but I want to know by how much.
So I believe I've been talking a lot with Frosk, and stylistically, there's a chance that Esports actually have an opportunity to create some chaos, create some opportunities. They are, of course, playing with Seiya and Oddie. And with War Angelus in the bot lane, there is a real world in which they can, like, I remember Seiya and Oddie being this hyper-aggressive duo that can build advantages through the 2v2 mids. And it comes down to a very big matchup between how the junglers control each other and how they deal with each other. I still think Splice should just be considered favorites because of their experience and talent. I can see you're enthusiastic, Frost. But before we get to that, he asked me a question about Detonation Focus Me, so I got to talk about my favorite region, Japan. Now, Detonation.
Why does no one want to let Frost talk?
What? Okay. So, Detonation Focus Me. On the realistic side, they are still slow. They are still the same old team, which is very much that they want to wait for team fights and they're not super proactive in the early game, and that's just how the rest of the region plays. So it's difficult to say that they should be considered favorites in this group, but who would I be if I didn't just have blind faith in Japan and say that this was probably the easiest group that they could get out on top of?
What a weeb. Moving on to Frosk.
I am a huge Esports Gaming fan. I actually think they're a really smart team. Usually when you're watching a lot of emerging regions, one of the issues is like fundamentals. Like, do they have a strong basis for fundamentals, or are they relying on just like stronger, superior mechanical players and individual performances? I think ISG are actually a really good like macro team and how they read the map, do rotations, but they don't attack you in the lane phase, which is why I'm super interested to see how they deal with Splyce. Unless Xerxes just absolutely destroys Adi, as you were talking about, I actually think there could be some really cool map trades and objective trades that people wouldn't really be used to seeing from an emerging region team. I think they're very, very smart. I'm hyped about this team.
I'm excited. Unfortunately, we've only got about 2 minutes left, so I need some quick thoughts before one last question. Group A, Clutch, Mammoth, UOL. Ender.
I mean, everyone has to put Clutch at the top of the list. I think it's just going to be top.
You were going to say UOL.
No. This is going to be top lane kingdom for Huni. He's going up against Boss and Fudge, which I think he has a very large advantage in those two matchups. And I honestly don't think the rest of the map actually matters for Clutch. I honestly think Huni's just going to run in and run all over these guys.
That's actually how I feel about this tournament. Unfortunately, looking across a lot of the emerging regions, they don't have very strong top laners on an international level. And so even though I think there's debate about who's better, Clutch or Splyce, I think Splyce is an easier matchup potentially because Chachi doesn't necessarily punish you in lane as hard as Huni does. And so because of that, I think Clutch are absolutely terrifying to these teams.
And I'm expecting a lot of local support for Huni back in Europe, playing in the region that, gave him his fame. The last question I have, throughout the entirety of our discussion here in the post-draw show, we have assumed that Clutch, Splyce, Hong Kong Attitude, and Damwon will win and will advance to the group stage. Which one of these teams is the most likely to get upset and why? That is the question I want you to answer. That will be our closing thoughts. We'll be back with Play-ins Groups next Wednesday. Ender, it's a difficult question. Who's it going to be?
What's that? That's like a 10 second. What? You can't answer that question in 10 seconds, Trevor.
Oh, I'm not asking 10 seconds. We've got a few.
Oh, we got a few seconds?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm going to say out of those 4 teams, the most likely upset for me is going to be Hong Kong Attitude coming out of the LMS. And I think that the teams that would be most likely to do it, I would like to look at Unicorns of Love with their jungler. I think they can get a lot of work done there and potentially an Isurus.
I'm in agreement with Ender. I also liked a lot of what Frost was saying about low-key. There's a world in which that they may even be able to upset and finish first in the group, forcing Hong Kong Attitude to play against one of the other
favorites,
three.
That are definitely making it.
Yeah. And then in that situation, there's a real difficulty for them. So like when I compare the other groups, it's unlikely to me that Splyce, Clutch, and Damwon are to be upset in the groups, whereas I could see it for HK.
Okay, final thoughts, Frost.
I actually think it's Splyce, and I think it's specifically if they run into the VCS representative. Again, I think stylistically, it's a pain for Splyce, and I don't think that, again, a lot of these emerging regions are missing kind of key, strong, standout top laners, but Chachi doesn't necessarily punish in lane. And if you just keep throwing a jungler at him, I think you can survive that.
Well, there you go.
And that's what low-key like to do. So if it's a Splyce low-key best of 5, I actually think that's the most likely upset.
That is exactly what I was hoping to hear, and we'll see whether or not those matchups come.
Yeah, you hate Splyce, apparently.
I love things that we can reference. I'm not an anti-Splyce person. I love references and statements that we can come back to when the play-ins group stage begins. The full world schedule will be released later today. I'd like to say goodbye from my analysts, from my Vitality representatives that help draw the play-ins and the group stage, and we will see you next Wednesday for the 2019 World Championship.
Get out of here.